Ryan Strong's steady progression to the First National leadership team began more than 2 decades ago when he joined the bank as a management associate. Since then, he has served as manager in branches across the state, as a commercial loan officer and director of mortgage lending. Strong leverages more than 20 years of hands-on operations experience and detailed knowledge of Alaska's economy in his role at the head of retail banking and cash management division. Now, his responsibilities right now include oversight of the operations of Anchorage branches, commercial cash management, mortgage lending, loan servicing, and escrow. Mr. Strong is co-chair of the bank's COVID-19 emergency response team and is responsible for the creation and implementation of First National's response to the pandemic crisis. Now, he is an active member and past president of the Alaska Bankers Association. And on a personal note for us, Ryan was recently elected to the AEDC Board of Directors beginning in 2021. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ryan Strong to the AEDC Voice. Ryan, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to the AEDC staff for making this opportunity available for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here and chat virtually a little bit today with everybody. I also want to thank Paula for your patronage. You're certainly a pleasure to do business, and we definitely appreciate that. And thanks for underwriting the employment report with us. I want to start a little bit and talk about what my plan is for the presentation, and then we'll jump right in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about First National Bank Alaska, who I'm very proud of and proud to be associated with, talk about our bank's beginning and how we've gotten to where we are today and what today looks like. Then I'll pivot and talk more about banking in general and specifically banking in 2020 and banking in a pandemic. And then finally, probably the most challenging part of my discussion will be I'll attempt to put on an economist hat and at least give you Ryan's opinion of where we may be going in 2021 from a banking perspective and what's looking, on the horizon as far as that goes. So with that, let's jump right in. And I want to tell you a little bit about my bank, First National Bank Alaska. We are extremely proud to be in January entering into our 100th year of doing business in Alaska. We were here in the territory days and when we achieved statehood. We were founded in January of 1922. And I can't make this stuff up, folks. We were founded by a candy maker named Winfield Irvin from Idaho, who, like a lot of people, came to Alaska and came to Anchorage in search of adventure and perhaps a little fortune along the way. He started the bank at the corner of 4th and G with one other employee, a former railroad worker who became a banker, with a vault that was typically filled with gold nuggets, untanned animal hides, and the like. Certainly for the dirt road rail town of Anchorage, the bank lobby was state of the art. We had marble countertops, and these marble counters were imported by Winfield Irvin from his candy making business in Idaho that he used to make candy on that became the counters for the teller windows. Certainly to meet the tobacco needs of our customers, there were brass spittoons at the foot of each teller cage. And the bank was started with a capital equity amount of $55,000 in 1922. Now, as Anchorage grew, so did the bank. And really, at this point, First National is typically synonymous with the Cuddy family. And the Cuddys first came into association with the bank in 1932. Warren Cuddy, grandfather to our current CEO and board chair, Betsy Lauer, Warren moved to Anchorage in 1932 and opened a law practice. One of his clients was the First National Bank. And as he became more interested in banking, he started to acquire shares in the bank. In 1941, 19 years after our founding, when Winfield Irvin retired, shortly thereafter, Warren Cuddy obtained controlling interest in the bank and became president. He acted as president until 1951 at his passing. At that time, his son, Dan Cuddy, who was starting his own law practice, answered the call and became president of the bank at age 32 years old. At that point in time, that made Dan the youngest bank president in the entire United States. And most people know Dan Cuddy's name at this point. He was a pillar of the state of Alaska and achieved so many things and helped so many people achieve so many things. And Dan served as bank president, CEO, board chair for over 62 years, which is just amazing. I got the opportunity to work with him, and one of my favorite jokes that he would say was, he's been working at this bank for 55 or 60 years, you fill in the time, but I've been working at this bank for 55 years and I've never received a promotion. He always had a great sense of humor. But after those 62 years, in 2013, his daughter, Betsy Lauer, assumed overall control of the bank and is currently our board chair and CEO. And Betsy herself has worked at the bank for over 40 years. So as the state grew and as Alaska grew, so did the bank. At this time, we have 645 employees, headquartered in Anchorage with branches, 27 branches in 18 communities across our great state. At the end of September, 9/30/2020, we had total assets of a little north of 4.7 billion and shareholders' equity of 585 million. So a lot of growth since that humble beginning of $55,000 of equity. A lot of our depositors trust us with their money. We have total deposits and repurchase agreements a little north of $4 billion at present, with a total loan portfolio of $2.3 billion. So those numbers are all well and good. A statistic that I'm always surprised by and somewhat amazed by is if you took a look at all of the banks in the country, and that number is always changing, but let's say it's a little more than 5,000 banks right now, and you stack ranked all of those banks in terms of asset size from one down to the smallest bank, First National is typically around 220th on that list out of 5,000 some banks. So our humble bank from, little state of Alaska, at least population wise, not geography wise, is really in the top 6 or 7% of asset size banks in the country. So what that means to me is we're big enough with financial resources, with, human resources, expertise to meet all of our customers' products, services, and advice needs. But at the same time, we are at our very core a community bank. Alaska is in our name, and Alaska is who we are. And our executive management all lives and works in Alaska. The majority of our shareholders live in Alaska, and our future is truly intertwined with that of Alaska relative to some of our national and international competitors. As the state goes, so go we. And so everything we do is to ultimately support our customers, our employees, our communities that we do business in, because as Alaska thrives, so do we. And at this point, I would like to again thank AEDC for the opportunity to serve on the board. I'm really looking forward to it. Our bank is headquartered in Anchorage. The majority of our employees are based in Anchorage. On a personal level, my wife is a small business owner in Anchorage, and my two daughters, 10th and 8th grade in Eagle River, go to school here. So both professionally and personally, I'm vested in Anchorage, invested in our state, and want to see it succeed. And I'm happy to do what I can to help that. So let's pivot at this point and talk about banking in 2020, and specifically banking in a pandemic. I have an opinion that a safe and sound banking system nationwide is a real foundational, need for our economy. From our core mission of safekeeping our depositors' money, to meeting the credit needs of individuals and businesses, to also being the backbone of the U.S. payment system as money moves back and forth across our country, banks have to ensure continuity of operations in both good times and bad. And so it was not surprising, beginning with the COVID mandates that came out across the country, banks were deemed an essential business and had to keep functioning. Now, that business continuity is nothing new to banks. We all have written business continuity plans. We have data centers that have redundancy built in so that if there's a natural disaster or some issue at one, you can seamlessly switch over to another and continue your operations. We do pandemic planning exercises. Before COVID hit, it was only a few months before that we had done a tabletop exercise about a global influenza outbreak and how we would operate with significant disruptions in staff numbers. And so banks have been dealing with BCP, business continuity planning, for a long, long time. We saw that put into place in a different format in the earthquake in Anchorage a couple of years ago. All that said, tabletop planning exercises and written plans are great and are necessary, but are no substitute for the real life. So when COVID hit and ramped up, banks jumped right in and answered the call. I know for my bank, and I'm sure for most other banks out there, the number one priority as COVID was ramping up was the safety of our employees and our customers and the continuity of our operations. So it was no surprise that you saw banks quickly adopting all of the recommended safety protocols for employees and for customers. Banks have been investing for years in internet and in channels of banking, and that investment certainly paid off in 2020. We saw significant increases in utilization rates for those types of products and really offered an opportunity for our customers to do the vast majority of their banking in a truly safe, albeit a distant manner. Even the stodgy old technology of drive-throughs were incredibly important, have been in 2020. Some might say those were going by the by, but as lobbies were forced to have restricted access to avoid in-person contact, good old drive-throughs became more important than they've been in a long, long time. And we saw a lot of usage of drive-throughs as a way of doing business. And as things were changing so rapidly, it was essential for our marketing teams in banks across the country to keep up to date in communications with our customers. So we saw lots of communication across various platforms, from websites to social media to direct emails to customers, expanded call center hours. Banks, ours and others alike, really wanted to provide resources to our customers, answer questions about when we're open, what the changing protocols are, how you get your necessary banking done. And at the same time, we provided resource information on loan modifications, loan programs, individual aid, and where folks could go to get the real accurate information and make application for some of those types of programs. So from the safety and the business continuity, I'm going to talk a little bit then about the lending, which is a huge part. I mentioned we have a $2.3 billion loan portfolio, thousands of borrowers. Banks all across the country had customers that were extremely uneasy, unsure of the future. No one knew what the future was going to look like. And so the first real response banks did was a series of loan modifications. And every bank did it their own way, but typically they were in the form of 3-month modifications, 6-month modifications. For the very hard hit tourism industry in Alaska, a lot of our modifications were 14 months because unfortunately 2020 was almost a complete bust. So we really jumped on the ball to make sure that the immediate credit payment needs of businesses, that they could get some relief and make it through some uncertain times. Beyond that, with the passage of the CARES Act, March 27, 2020, banks were really called upon in a way that we would have never probably envisioned in the past. With the passage of that CARES Act, banks were asked to basically be a conduit for a $669 billion federal loan program, forgivable loan program, ultimately a grant program in most cases, called the Paycheck Protection Program. And banks, we like to be slow and steady, and we like to understand the rules of the game. With the PPP program, banks basically acted on the faith of the federal government to do what they said they were going to do, and really acted in the best interest of our customers and made this loan program available, even as rules were literally being written, as loans were being made, guidance was being issued, and questions were being answered after loans had been made. But really, we all know banks and customers didn't have time to wait for a perfect rollout. And anytime you roll out hundreds of billions of dollars of federal aid, it's not going to be perfect. And it wasn't perfect, but all in all, I think it was a resounding success. So my bank, and I know a lot of other banks, literally employed teams of employees in round-the-clock shifts to process thousands of PPP applications and get them into the SBA's E-Trans system. There was certainly uncertainty at the beginning if the amount allocated would even meet those needs of the customer. So it really was a somewhat frenetic process, but for 6 or 8 weeks, we were running 24 hours a day to meet the needs of our customers. And really, these PPP loans at the end of the day allowed our businesses to keep their staff employed, to keep their doors open, and to cover necessary business expenses like rent and utility. So Bill mentioned I'm currently the past president of the Alaska Bankers Association, and I could not be more proud of the effort that Alaska banks did with the Paycheck Protection Program. And so Jerry's put up a screen for us here that we can take a look at some of the stats for PPP lending in Alaska. And you'll see that total PPP loans done to Alaska businesses is a little over $1.3 billion, with the number of jobs tied to those PPP loans of 117,000 or so. And if you consider as of October 2019, we had 247,000 jobs in the state. Close to half of the total jobs in the state for private payrolls were ultimately tied to a PPP loan. 12,000 or so total loans were made. Now, while the total number of PPP lenders that did loans to Alaska businesses numbered 212, ultimately 70.7% of those loans were made by Alaska-based banks. And if you look at the money tied to it of little over 1 billion was made by Alaska banks. So Alaska banks did the lion's share of the PPP work for our customers. And, it just was very important at the time, and it may be important here again in the future. So that's a little bit about what PPP was early in this pandemic. A little bit overshadowed with that has to do with some positive news in the mortgage market, both for refinances and the financing of new home purchases in Alaska. Mortgage rates are typically tied to the 10-year Treasury. And at the beginning of 2020, the 10-year Treasury was probably about 1.85%. Well, at its lowest, it got down to about 0.55%. And has hovered for most of the year in a range of about 0.6 to 0.8 or 0.9%. So as that 10-year Treasury plunged, so did mortgage rates. And for those who could qualify, was a real opportunity to lock in some unprecedented, extremely low rates. We had customers getting refinances on 10 or 15-year mortgages at 2% or so, 30-year mortgages at 2.5 to 2.75%. And with the Treasury looking and the Fed looking to keep rates low, mortgage rates still are very low. And so for those who haven't yet, it's still a great opportunity. And with those low rates comes better household cash flow, better liquidity, perhaps a chance to tap some equity out of homes. And on the new home purchase, that's been another bright spot as home values have risen statewide. And as I looked at the statistics, new home sales are up close to 20% year over year in Alaska. A lot of that fueled by very, very historically low interest rates. So that was some of the banking aspects in 2020. Now I will move to the more challenging aspect, which is to put on my economist hat and talk a little bit about the future. Now, my crystal ball is probably murky in general, and in 2020, it's going to be even murkier than normal. But I should make a disclaimer at first. First of all, I am by nature optimistic, and my bank by nature is optimistic and bullish about Alaska's future. Like I said at the beginning, we've been in business in Alaska for almost a century. And in doing so, we've operated in robust periods of expansion, and we've operated in severe recessions. And, I believe, and I know our state and Anchorage is filled with resourceful and resilient individuals and businesses. Our state's resources, both of the natural resource variety and of the human resource variety, are vast with a lot of future growth potential. So in general, I'm optimistic and positive about our state's future. Even prior to 2020, as we've lived in a multi-year state recession, I've been impressed with our business's ability to see that through and still succeed, and our individual residents to do the same. That said, so predicting the future is always an imprecise art. I'll talk a little bit about what we do know. I'll start with the bad, and I'm going to move to the good. I do know the job situation is not good at the moment. When you look at the October jobs report, comparing 20 to 19, we're down 28,900 jobs total, 8.8%. Some of the hardest hit sectors, we know how brutal COVID and the pandemic has been on the leisure and hospitality industry. Their jobs are down 9,600 year over year, or 27.7%. Oil, a key driver of our state's economy, oil and gas employment is down 3,000 jobs, or about 30.6%. and the growing area of transportation, warehouse, and utilities. And the job losses are primarily in transportation, but are down 4,700 or 20.7%. If you take a look at the unemployment numbers, unemployment rates can have a bit of noise in them. If you look at unemployment claims in October are about 7 times the level they were a year prior. So I could go on into other sectors, but we know that the job situation at the moment isn't great. Cases of COVID-19 in Alaska are at or near all-time highs, with the latest Anchorage rate of 89.2 cases, new cases per 100,000 in population. And the current restrictions, hunker down restrictions in Anchorage and other communities across the state, while very important to slow the spread of the virus, certainly have impacts on our businesses and their employees as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the good then. We all read the news. There is very positive news on the vaccine front, with large-scale vaccinations of healthcare workers and nursing home residents already underway. Oil prices, I mentioned, Alaska is absolutely in the oil and gas business. Oil prices have stabilized over the last few months in the low to mid 40s, and even today seem to be going a little bit over 50. So there's a slight upward trend in oil prices. Low interest rates, those help businesses, those help individuals with cheap borrowing costs to be able to meet a variety of needs at a low interest burden. Talking back to banks a little bit, bank deposits, both at my bank and at banks in Alaska and across the country, bank deposits are way up, sometimes over 30% this year. And what that means to me is that there are a lot of businesses and individuals with some dry powder. They've got cash and liquidity on hand, waiting on the sidelines for conditions to get a little better, to improve, to get back to more of the business as usual. Now, there are certainly businesses and individuals that are suffering and have been extremely hard hit as well. But overall, bank deposits are up, which tells me there's liquidity and money waiting to get involved again. Bank delinquencies, both at my bank and at others, are at or near all-time lows. Now, I have to say there are bank modifications for certain loans still in place that could be helping that delinquency low number. But even most of those modifications have interest payments tied to them. So there are payments being made by borrowers through the pandemic. So as we look forward, the future is certainly uncertain. I expect pockets of the economy to do well in 2021, and I'm not sure, and I'm a little more concerned about other pockets of the economy. From an academic level, analyzing 2020, one of the more interesting facets, again, from an academic level of the pandemic has been the different industries and how it has been such an uneven impact across the country. So as we look forward, I'll start with oil and gas because that is so important to our state's economy. Again, with that price stabilizing and the upward trend, I spoke with a couple contacts I have in the business, and they are cautiously optimistic is how I would characterize it. One of them did say, and this is long after ballot measure 1 failed, but one of them did say that had ballot measure 1 passed, investment in new exploration, new development would have come to a virtual standstill. And so I do think it's positive from an economic standpoint that ballot measure 1 did not pass. So oil and gas, I think there's some cautious optimism there. I'll switch to government. Government is a big employer in Alaska and a source of jobs and funding in Alaska. It's been a couple hours since I've checked the news, so maybe something's changed since I checked earlier this morning. But in my opinion, further stimulus and relief funding is sorely needed to get our businesses and to get our individuals through these next couple months of this COVID surge, to give those vaccines time to be administered and time to do their work. And so I'm certainly hoping that there can be an additional round of PPP funding for businesses. I'm not sure how SBA and Treasury would roll that out. In my opinion, it would be better rolled out specifically targeted to those businesses that have had significant income disruptions versus kind of a blanket application like it was in round 1. And I do believe that further unemployment insurance benefits need to be extended as we work our way through this surge that we're dealing with right now. Tourism, as I've mentioned before, was one of our hardest hit industries and is one of my major areas of concern for 2021. I've spoken to some folks in the Southeast. It's my understanding that the cruise ship companies, who were scheduled in 2020 to bring over 1 million visitors to Alaska, that they're working hard with the CDC on protocols for the 2021 season. I sure hope that they can find some type of safe way to do that. But I know that out of all of our industries, that is one of the most uncertain ones looking forward until we see a little better how this works going forward. So I know we're a little short on time and I want to leave time for question and answers, but overall, it's going to be a mixed bag in 21. We're going to have to push through, and really, this probably isn't a surprise to anybody on this call, but it all depends on the process and progress with the virus and our mitigation efforts, and really the efficacy and the adoption rates of the vaccine. And from the public polling I look at, the public is steadily getting more accepting of getting the vaccine, which from a business person perspective is positive for me. The more people that get vaccinated, the more immunity that gets developed, the quicker we can return to more normal operations and get our businesses and our employees back at work. So before we move to question and answers, I'd like to close with a quick plug. My marketing department would have my hide if I didn't mention this, but First National Bank, the holiday seasons are normally a great time for us to interact with our customers, have social gatherings, express our thanks for the relationship that we have with them. Obviously this year, those look a lot different than they do in the past, but tomorrow, First National is hosting its first Spirit of Alaska holiday concert. December 17th from 7 to 8 p.m. This is a free and festive 1-hour virtual concert featuring holiday favorites and modern performances by local artists. I think it's going to be fun, great way to hear some tunes, support some local artists, and most importantly, attendees will also be given the opportunity to help hungry Alaskans by donating to the United Way of Alaska, and the bank is going to match up to $50,000 of donations to help hungry Alaskans this holiday season. So more information about that can be found at our website, fnbalaska.com, or our Facebook page, but I would encourage everybody here tomorrow night, 7 to 8, please tune in and please participate. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to talk. Would much prefer it be in person, but we know this is the drill these days. So thank you for your time. And Bill, I'll turn it back over to you for how you want to run this.
Well, Ryan, thank you for such a great presentation. We really appreciate the breadth and depth of what you just shared with us. We've got a few questions that we want to ask, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. Audience members, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A or chat features on your Zoom, and we'll get to those questions in just a moment. So Ryan, I'll throw out the first one. How does being an Alaska-owned and operated business guide your efforts at First National Bank Alaska?
Sure, thanks, Bill. It's obviously important. I talked about being a community bank. I talked about living and operating and working in Alaska, being managed in Alaska. I do like to go back to our mission statement, which has been around for at least 50 years, unchanged. But our mission statement has 4 facets to it. Number one is to safe keep our depositors' money. Run a safe place, run a good bank, successful bank for our customers to keep their money. Number 2 is to provide all banking services needed to the communities and our customers that we serve. Number 3 is to provide our employees competitive pay, competitive employee benefits, and a pleasant working environment. Number 4 is to earn a proper return for our shareholders. And we firmly believe at First National that if we do those first 3, if we take care of our customers, if we take care of our employees and our communities that we do business, we will earn a proper return for our shareholders. So that all kind of comes back to Alaska, and that's where we do business. That is our market. As Alaska goes, so goes we. It's cooked into our mission statement, and it's just cooked into everything we do. So it really does, the best interests of our customers and the best interests of our communities drives our decision making and our strategic planning. And we just love being here and look forward to being here many years into the future.
Great. So, we're always looking for success stories, and especially in these somewhat difficult times that we're dealing with. What's been one of the more exciting successes the bank has had in the last year?
That's a great question. I think I've hit on a couple of them, in the prepared comments that I already had. I certainly think a success was a safe operating environment and the continuity of our bank's operations. And then, of course, the lending, needs that we've met of our customers. Bankers like to make loans. That's what we do. It's in our DNA. We want to help our customers succeed and survive. And it was more survive than succeed probably this year. But those are two big successes I've already talked about. Probably another one I'd like to highlight is even throughout the pandemic, the bank's plan this year is still to deliver over $1 million in charitable donations to nonprofits across the state. And so back to those comments about the economy being really uneven right now, there are lots of individuals in need, and the bank is really proud to be able to provide year in and year out, whether it's a pandemic or not, that type of support to our important nonprofits across the country. So that's one that I didn't talk about yet, but that I'm very proud of.
Good deal. So we always like to, get to know on a personal level our guests. And one of our favorite questions that gets a lot of attention from our audience is, what keeps you up at night right now? What is it that's got you thinking late into the night and has you, maybe losing a little bit of sleep over?
Well, that's a good question. There are probably two things that come to mind. For a time, I was our bank's chief risk officer. And so I did a lot of formal risk management and planning for risk. And you can't ask a risk manager in banking what keeps them up at night without cybersecurity and fraud being at the top of that list. And we read about some national issues now with some cybersecurity breaches. So the bank spends considerable resource, both time, money, and human capital working on cybersecurity and making sure that our data, our customers, is safe. So I can't answer that question without talking about that. But beyond that, when I look at banking in general, talked about digital distribution of banking services, kind of growth in those types of channels. It's a global marketplace these days. It's competitive. Customer experience expectations are crafted by the likes of Apple, Amazon, and as we roll out further digital capabilities, further ways to interact with our customers, do business, communicate, we really have to make that experience continue to evolve. That's what the customer expects. I know our bank and a lot of other banks are investing in those types of channels and figuring out how to continue to make banking more accessible to our customers, easier to do, more seamless in what they do every day. So, digital competition and the future of banking, we spend a lot of time working on that amongst the day-to-day work that we do for our customers.
Good deal. All right, so we've got our first question from the audience. And again, I'll remind our audience members, you just use the Q&A feature and you can ask any question you would like of Ryan, and we will definitely ask that question. So you mentioned that Alaska, this is from our questioner, was expecting just over 1.1 million cruise ship passengers in 2020. Are there any preliminary estimates for 2021 cruise passenger counts that you're aware of?
Short answer is I'm not, Bill. Some of my folks in the East might be better able to answer that question, and I could try to answer it and get it back to you after this meeting. So I don't know a good answer for that. My hunch is that, it is still so uncertain in terms of how that's going to look. It's got to be more than last year, but it's going to be nowhere near 1 million, in my opinion.
Okay. Another question on the vein of my previous question is, what gets you excited when you get up in the morning? What is it that you're looking forward to the most when you get ready to start your day for whether it's work or family or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I kind of joke with family, but I think it's true. I believe I was born in a bank. I think banking is in my DNA. I love the analytical portion of it. I love the personal interaction portion of it. From my days as a commercial lender, helping businesses get started, helping businesses expand, helping those customers reach their potential and make their dreams come true. Sounds a bit corny, but it's absolutely true. And it's what makes me enjoy coming to the bank every day.
So I've got another question related to your presentation. You talked about pockets of success out there in the economy with different industry sectors showing success in the face of the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit more about those in terms of where you're seeing success in the current circumstances and what you think might be other industry sectors that you might not have mentioned before that might be opportunities for growth in the coming year?
Absolutely. I think right away I'll call them toy dealers, motorhomes, boats, ATVs, motorcycles, those types of things. Maybe not auto dealers quite as much, but as travel stopped and those disposable dollars that might have otherwise gone to trips stopped, a lot of people pointed those other directions. And that was certainly a piece of the economy that are having record years. We have a motorhome dealer that can't keep them in stock. A lot of home directed improvements. So supply stores, contractors, realtors are having good years, mortgage companies and lenders, again, because of the low interest rates, a lot of money is getting invested in home improvements, which, there are a lot of those industries that benefit off of that. So again, it's that, just kind of as soon as the dynamic world changed and were altered, those monies went. Some of it's in banks, like I talked about, and waiting for more opportunity in the future too.
So besides the sectors that you mentioned that you see challenges for, are there any other sectors that you're watching closely to see how they're going to fare this next several months and going into next year that you're keeping a particular eye out for ways that your bank can be of assistance to them and how the community should be stepping up for them?
Yeah, I mean, we have certainly an attention and a concern across the whole breadth of the economy. With federal dollars driving a lot of construction projects generally, we look to see how that's going to affect commercial contractors and commercial construction, and whether that'll mean more money coming to that or less money into that in the future. I will have to say, this is me speaking personally, I have a significant concern about the lack of a long-term fiscal plan for our state. And when you look at any industry that's looking to make investment and wants the rules of the game are and how the state's going to fund its business and its services going forward, you don't want that investment when the rules are constantly changing or at risk of being changed. And so, I do think across all facets and all parts of our government, statewide, we need to come up with some type of long-term strategy for that fiscal plan to make it a better climate for investment. So, that's something I think that if we could make some progress on, that would help the business climate and new investment as well.
Excellent. I think we have another question from the audience. This is somebody's outing you on something here. So it so happens Ryan summited Denali a year or so ago. Upon his return to the flatland, he shared some lessons learned and wisdom he brought back from that endeavor, lessons he found applicable to daily life and industry. I wonder if he might be willing to share those ideas.
I got a couple suspects who probably fed you that question there, Bill. I was fortunate enough and lucky enough to summit Denali last year, which was, I'm not an international mountaineer, but as a mostly lifelong Alaskan and as someone who plans on spending the rest of their life in Alaska, I wanted to be old and tell my grandkids, yeah, I stood on the top of that. So with the help of some friends, I was able to do it. But, I did learn a couple lessons from it. And one is simply the need and importance of preparation. You can't go there and not be prepared. You have to put the work in ahead of time. Beyond that, really the importance of a team. I wouldn't have gotten to the top without the help of my teammates. And so, sometimes you may want to do it yourself. You may want to finish that project. You may think no one else can do it as good as you can, but to get to the top of that mountain, you really do have to rely on a team. And I can think of a couple moments that I wouldn't have gotten through without them. So that's another important lesson as well.
Excellent. We're coming down to the end of the program, folks. And so I'm going to remind these very large audience that we have, which we deeply appreciate, that your questions are really an important part of this. And there are no bad questions. I'm throwing you under the bus there, Ryan, but there are no bad questions. Please use the Q&A. I've got one more question left on my list. And then if we don't have any more questions, we'll be wrapping up here momentarily. So what opportunities, I know you've talked about digitalization of the banking industry and financial services. What other opportunities do you see for innovation in your industry in the coming years?
You know, that digitalization is certainly the biggest one. There are so many pieces and parts of that, Bill. You know, the banking system as a whole has come out with a solution for person-to-person payments that can be run through the banking system. That's the Zelle program, as opposed to fintech competitors like Venmo or PayPal. You know, we think that's an opportunity for more bank innovation and growth, and a safe way for our customers to transfer money from person to person. You know, but if I get away from the digital channel for a minute and talk a little bit about branches, there are some in banking who might say branches are unnecessary anymore. And, you know, we certainly don't believe that. We see a different future for our branches, though. They will be smaller. They will be more tech, you know, involved within the branch. They will have less staff, but staff that are better trained to meet the consultative needs of our customers as opposed to the transactional need of our customers. Payday used to be a very big day in banking because everybody would show up with their paychecks and want to cash their paychecks. The vast majority of those are direct deposited now. People come into the bank much more to get questions answered, to get help for a specific situation. And so we need to reimagine and get our branches better suited to meet that type of challenge. And, you know, when I think back to that comment about the Amazons and the you know, Googles of the world, back to us being a core Alaska-based community bank, we do believe there's a fundamental need for our customers for a local banker who lives in their community, who understands their business, who understands their industry, who understands the state, who lives and walks and raises their kids in this state. And so we believe that adds value. And so while we want those digital accoutrements and we want the systems and we want the great customer experience, and we'll keep working in that direction, fundamentally, we're a relationship-based bank, and that one-on-one connection is what we, you know, hinge our future on. And so we look forward to continuing to just be as good as possible at that type of work.
So I've got one last question from our audience, then I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here, Ryan. And this one fits very nicely as a closing question because it's right in line with AEDC's priorities strategically with our number one priority of revitalizing downtown. So what do you, the questioner asks, what do you see in the future for downtown Anchorage, if anything, with the new housing and investment that's happening now?
I love downtown. Some of my fondest memories are working for the bank as a college student when we had our headquarters at 4th and G. I joke around that that's where I learned to parallel park, because at that time there was 2 hours of free parking per block in downtown Anchorage. And so if your boss was nice, you could take a quick break and move your car every 2 hours, but you couldn't park on the same block. So you had to remember which block you parked on. And so very quickly you learned to get into a small parking space to get on the right block. But I digress just a bit. I do love and enjoy downtown very much. And I think a vibrant downtown is important to any city, certainly a city that wants to grow. And so I'm happy about the property tax abatement that's in place. I think that's helped a couple projects really get going. I think there is more room, and I know AEDC is working on this in terms of trying to provide more information to public officials and more guidance on directions we can go. But I think there's a lot more we can do to support and incentivize development. We have done business in other states, even though the vast majority of our business is in Alaska, and other states have different methods to help incentivize new development. Different condominium laws that make it easier to develop new housing, which we desperately need. And it would be great to have more housing downtown. So I think there's a real role and a calling for AEDC to continue to work on these. And I don't know if show the light is the right term, but really to help, give some examples and connect some people to understand better what options there are out there. Some of this stuff doesn't come naturally. And so you've got to see if other places have done it and it's worked. Let's do it. So I think there's a lot of room for growth downtown, but I certainly want to see that happen in the future.
Well, we've got one last question. Oh no, this is just a quick comment. Hello, Bill. Question was asked about 2021 tourism projections. Currently, experts are throwing out a ballpark of 300 to 500,000 visitors, but it depends on yet to be decided cruise ship regulations. So pretty much in line with your earlier comments about, the uncertainty around this at this point. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us here at AEDC, as well as this very large group of folks who came to hear from you today. We deeply appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share your thoughts with the community, and want to thank you again just for all the things that you are doing for Anchorage. And boy, do we look forward to having you on the board next year. So excited to have had you here today and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, AEDC. Go to our website. Go to Spirit of Alaska concert tomorrow night, 7 to 8. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that wraps us up. Paula, thank you again for your support and sponsorship of this series. We wish you all safe and happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you at our next AEDC Voice event in 2021. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.